Welcome to the May 2025 edition of Hunt Camp Mail. I hope everybody had a fantastic turkey season, and I hope you don't go into debt as we go into fishing season. It's not hard to do. YouTube is experiencing difficulties again. I believe that half the problem is probably intentional. They don't like certain content. And the other half is probably AI or algorithm related glitches in the system. People are being automatically unsubscribed from my channel. Dozens of you have notified me of that. And others just aren't seeing my videos pop up in their feed anymore after I upload them. Comments are missing or are being thrown into my review bin for no apparent reason at all. I mean, there's no hate speech or cussing or anything like that in it, but YouTube's been doing that a lot lately too. I really didn't believe this until I started responding to your comments, and some of my own comments disappeared. One of my videos this month got attacked by spam bots, and I notified YouTube of that, and they never even responded to me. So I don't know what's going up with them right now, but it is what it is. We're all playing in their house. It's their business, and we have to live by their rules with their problems, I guess. So let's turn those frowns upside down and get to this month's mail. And our first question for May is from Gary in Australia. Gary wrote, I've been subscribed to you for almost 10 years. That was back when you had your old YouTube channel. You had good things to say about Winchester's MOA trigger for a long time. I watched your new video last night and noticed that you changed your mind. Did Winchester change the MOA trigger? Well, that's a great question. And before I answer your question here, I want to thank you for sticking with me for the last 10 years. But what you noticed concerning my opinion of the MOA trigger is absolutely correct. First of all, before we go any further, I just want to emphatically state that the MOA trigger has been proven to be an extremely reliable trigger. It's been used now for 19, almost 20 years. And I've never heard of one failing, no matter how dirty or wet they get. So these are dead reliable triggers. When the MOA trigger first came out, it was like having a factory Timney trigger. There was no creep. It had great adjustability on it. Then at around, 2016, when a lot of things started transitioning, especially, a lot of the parts that were being produced for the Model 70 at the South Carolina FN plant, a lot of that started being produced in-house or locally in Portugal. So around 2016, they started putting glue over the adjustment screw, and they seemed like they added a lot of creep to the trigger after that. Then, eventually recently, they made them to where the adjustment screw does almost absolutely nothing. And this was obviously a decision directed by Winchester and Browning's legal department. We used to love that old Model 70 trigger, but those old trigger designs can just never really exist in today's modern litigious society where everybody wants to sue everybody. On those old Model 70 triggers, anybody could adjust them so light to where they would go off if you barely tapped your gun. And, that just didn't sit well with their legal department, I guess. So my advice to you is to just get an aftermarket trigger, adjust it the way you want it, fully function test it, and enjoy your rifle. And our next letter is from Hagen in Germany. Hagen wrote, what do you think is the best metal finish for a hard use rifle? PVD, DLC, Cerakote, nitriding, parkerizing, or just bare stainless steel? Well, Hagen, there's 4 enemies of any gun coating that you have. That's wear, water, chemicals, and heat. Cerakote is awesome because you can customize it to match any color that you want. Or even if you have if you're rebarreling a rifle and you want the barrel color to match the receiver, you could do that with Cerakote. But I don't really like Cerakote on internal parts because it sits on the metal surface and can cause clearance issues and function issues. I really like black nitride. I really like that stuff. It's also known as melanite, or it's called tenifer if you're a Glock owner. I have a Glock that I've carried in nasty, humid heat for the past 30 years, and it still looks great. And Cerakote wouldn't have lasted half that long going in and out of a Kydex holster constantly. Black nitride is actually a surface treatment, not a surface coating. So it won't alter the tolerances of the moving parts in your gun. And I think that's really great stuff. DLC, I don't think you mentioned that in your list here, but DLC is currently the darling of the gun coatings world. On paper, it looks to be the greatest thing since titties. I mean, people just talk that stuff up like crazy, but I have seen some problems in real life with the DLC coatings. I've seen DLC coated actions have chipping issues on that coating, but I don't think it's the coating itself. I think that DLC is very dependent on having absolutely perfect surface preparation and application. So I think it's more sensitive to that than any other type of coating. So you're either going to get something that's so awesome it blows your mind, or you're going to get a coating that you wish you never had done. And our next letter is from Chris from South Africa. Chris wrote, "My question ties up with your recent and sad appraisal of what's going on with the Portugal Model 70s. I am one of the many that bought a Model 70 Super Grade. I don't have the tools nor a borescope to check the throat and crown, but so far it shoots pretty well, so I don't have buyer's remorse at this stage. Their website seems to indicate that the barrel I have is button drawn, not hammer forged. Both my Model 70 and my potential future Musgrave rifle have button drawn barrels. Could you touch on the pros and cons of this process as opposed to cold hammer forging? I suppose, as with any given industrial process, there are quality grades within that process, meaning not all button draw barrels are created equal. Likewise, not all hammer forged barrels are of equal quality. Any insights you have into this would be appreciated." Looking at the comment section of that video, I think many people misinterpreted what I said as button rifled barrels are bad, but I never said that at all. Although button rifled barrels are not as good, in my opinion, as a top tier cut rifled barrel, the potential isn't any worse than a hammer forged barrel. All I pointed out in that video is that hammer forged barrels that came out of the FN machine gun factory in South Carolina were superior to the current button rifled barrels sourced somewhere in Europe. And that was the only point I was making in that video. I wasn't trying to start a button versus hammer forged barrel war with that video. Both methods of barrel construction can be excellent or poor, depending on who makes the barrel. Whoever's making the Model 70 barrels right now obviously has some quality issues that they need to work through. I also can't tell you who Musgrave buys their barrels from, and I have limited experience with those rifles, so unfortunately, I'm of no help to you on that subject. And our next letter is from Rodrigo in Arizona. Rodrigo wrote, "Tim at Buffalo Bore Ammunition has been posting a lot of videos lately about hunting in Africa and handguns. People on the internet are currently destroying him. I know you said in the past that you like his ammo, but don't agree with a lot of what Tim says. He is obviously a bigger is better type of person when it comes to cartridges, just like Mark Sullivan and several others. Do you agree with that philosophy?" This is a tough one to answer because, I think Tim is a nice guy and I don't want to totally throw him under the bus. But as you know, I don't sidestep issues or bullshit on this channel. So go ahead and answer this. In my opinion, Tim is a lot like President Trump. He offers a great product, cares about what really matters, and he's a hard worker. But he can't stay off of media and tends to claim and say a lot of cringeworthy things. Sometimes what he says is awesome, and sometimes you wish you just stopped for his own good. I watched one of his recent episodes this year where he claimed that kinetic energy was invented by the ammo manufacturers to make smaller, faster bullets look better. I don't think Hornady existed in the 17th century when the kinetic energy formula was being created. Tim recently posted videos of himself shooting at a Cape Buffalo at very close range with his 600 Nitro Express rifle and missing shots on that buffalo. He obviously, from watching the video, I'll admit it, he obviously can't handle the recoil of his 600 Nitro Express, but he keeps telling his fans how great it is. The internet is just tearing him apart right now for that, but honestly, it's his own fault. He posted the video. Tim is actually living proof that bigger is not better, because a decent shot with a 375 is way better than missing with a 600 Nitro Express. And our next letter is from Yanni in Anaheim, California. Yanni wrote, "Your bullet penetration video changed my entire outlook on the terminal performance of a hunting bullet. I'm sorry to admit this, Desert Dog, but I didn't believe you about velocity being just as important as sectional density for penetration. Then I did my own research and found out that you are correct. When it comes to penetration with the exact same type of bullet, the speed of lighter bullets will usually make up for the lower sectional density numbers. I also now understand that sectional density numbers only matter after the bullet hits an animal, and those SD numbers are meaningless because bullet construction takes over. Thank you for enlightening all of us." Well, thank you for the letter, Yanni. And just to let you know, I was actually born in Anaheim. Hunters became so attached to sectional density that they fail to understand its lack of relevance when a bullet actually hits a medium. Like I said in that video, the sectional density formula was invented to predict artillery barrier penetration, not hunting bullet performance. Field and Stream magazine actually did a test on sectional density and penetration a few years ago. They took the same Swift Scirocco bullet in different weights, loaded in factory ammunition, and shot ballistics gel at 100 yards. They found that even though sectional densities were vastly different, they penetrated to almost exactly the same depth in gel. This is because the lighter bullets were traveling faster, which is always the case with hunting ammunition. The increased velocity made up for the lower sectional density. They penetrated to the exact same distance as bullets with much higher SDs. The point of that video that I produced was to never judge a hunting bullet using sectional density as the determining factor. And our next letter is from Brian in Henderson, Nevada. Brian wrote, "I saw your post about the attack on the hunting camp in Mozambique by Muslim extremists." That was actually I believe, a post on Facebook for the Desert Dog Outdoors page. "Didn't you warn a couple of your viewers on Hunt Camp Mail not to go there right now? You might want to send them that information." Well, I warned them not to book those hunts right now because you could see things were starting to go very bad in that area of Mozambique. Islamic terror cells are running rampant in the north of that country right now, and they finally decided to attack hunting camps. In case my viewers don't know, late last month, a hunting camp in northern Mozambique, in actually a popular hunting area, was attacked by Muslim extremists, where 4 people were taken hostage and 2 members of that camp staff were beheaded. Central and southern Mozambique seem fine right now, but most of the hunting takes place in the northern part of the country where ISIS cells are active right now. The hunting outfitters, I don't really like this, but I kind of understand it, but I don't like it. The hunting outfitters in those areas are really trying to downplay the situation to keep the clients coming in, but you really need to be smarter than that. If you plan on taking any expensive trip, this is just as a reminder because of the situation right here. If you plan on taking any expensive trips, whether it's hunting, fishing, or sightseeing, always get trip insurance in case you have to cancel for something like this. I've had to use my trip insurance one time before to cancel a fishing trip to the Coral Sea north of Australia, when a huge tropical cyclone hit the area. So always buy trip insurance and monitor current conditions, both weather and political conditions. And next we have a question from Mike. Mike wrote, so if you add length to your barrel, such as a 26-inch barrel, to increase your muzzle velocity, will it increase recoil compared to a 16-inch barrel? I'm talking about a cartridge that would benefit from a longer barrel, of course. If the rifles are the exact same weight, according to Newton's third law, the shorter barrel with less velocity would experience less recoil. Lower velocity results in less force being directed back at the shooter. But we also know that a 10-inch longer barrel will also add significant weight to that rifle, which will decrease felt recoil. The added weight of the rifle with that 10-inch longer barrel will probably counteract recoil from the additional velocity. So it's a balancing act that will be specific to each individual rifle that you use. Too many people shoot a short barrel and see all of that ejecta and flames shoot out the barrel, and they're just shocked by that deafening noise and muzzle blast. But shooting big cartridges out of short barrels looks like pure violence, but that cool show isn't actually causing recoil. The most important aspect of barrel length isn't recoil anyway. It's being able to get a complete and efficient powder burn for any given cartridge. Obviously, a Magnum case full of slow burning powder is going to need a longer barrel. Our next letter is from Mark in Clovis, California. Mark wrote, I was at Sportsman's Warehouse and they have a Bergara B14 and 7mm 08 that I'm thinking of buying. I think the 7mm 08 is the perfect round for everything in California. You don't talk about the Bergara B14 much. What is your opinion? I think I've answered this in past hunt camp mails, but I'll go ahead and rehash it again. I think that Bergara makes a decent rifle for the price. Like everything else, quality has fallen off a little from when they first went big in the rifle market. But, you're seeing that with all American and European mass-produced firearms right now. My opinion is that Bergara makes a better Model 700 than Remington does. Back in the 90s, we would all tear apart our Model 700s. We'd true the action, install a match barrel, do a trigger job, and bed them into an aftermarket stock. Because virtually everybody did these things, the Remington 700 became the king of aftermarket support. Bergara was pretty smart by making their rifles accept 700 stocks, bases, and triggers. The X-Bolt is actually a better rifle than the B14 is, but the X-Bolt has very little aftermarket support. The extractor on the B14 is a little bit better than the Remington 700 design, but it's still not great. It's a Savage style detent ball extractor. I wish Bergara would have used a M16 style extractor like how it does. But, that's my opinion on your Bergara rifle. And our next letter is from Steve in Idaho. Steve wrote, I'm traveling to South Africa to hunt and to Victoria Falls for a few days with my wife. My wife is really stressed out about being targeted for robberies and theft. Do you have any tips to stay safe in those places? Well, you should really subscribe to my channel and watch a video that I produced a couple years ago called how to stash cash on hunting trips. Might have been maybe 3 years ago. And I had some great ideas in that video for hiding cash. But let's talk about not being a target for theft while you're in Africa, particularly South Africa, which is one of the worst. Thieves in most places, contrary to popular belief, thieves in most of these places are very smart. They pay attention to particular details about a tourist. They know that robbing somebody that's on a photo or eco safari is a waste of time. Those tourists stick to really touristy destinations and pay for almost everything with a credit card. And they tend to be relatively cheap as a group. So they're not a high value target. But hunters are a different story. Thieves know, especially in South Africa, that American hunters carry huge sums of cash on them to tip their PHs and the camp staff at the conclusion of their hunt. Hunters are also generally a wealthier demographic than photo or eco tourists are. So try not to look like a hunter, especially a rich American hunter. Don't walk around Joburg looking like a homer, with your Kuyu camo on or your Sitka gear on. Don't have Vortex or Hornady decals all over your luggage. Wear a silicone wedding band. Don't wear your good wedding rings while you're hunting in Africa. Definitely don't wear any watch that even resembles, I don't care if it's a cheap imitation, don't wear any watch that might resemble a Rolex or an Omega. You're an instant target. So the less you look like a rich white hunter in African cities, the better off you're going to be. Our next letter is from Justin in Fremont, California. Justin wrote, "Your video about Winchester quality got me thinking about something I don't like about my Model 70. I just bought a Model 70 featherweight in 300 Winchester Short Magnum, and the factory recoil pad seems stiff. This rifle pounds my shoulder and is hard to shoot accurately. What recoil pad do you recommend?" Oh boy, I hate to be harsh with you, Justin, but that rifle is pounding your shoulder because you bought a very lightweight rifle that shoots a heavy recoiling Magnum cartridge. And that's the reason you're experiencing what you're experiencing. As far as recoil pads go, the Model 70 comes with a really nice Pachmayr decelerator recoil pad. And I think the decelerator is the perfect recoil pad for most rifles. It's kind of the Goldilocks of recoil pads. It's not too soft and squishy, and it's not too firm. It's almost just right. If you get too soft of a recoil pad with a big heavy kicking cartridge, it can cause your fingers to actually slam into the trigger guard during heavy recoil. And limb saver pads are really famous for doing that on big bore rifles. So a really squishy recoil pad can also throw shots off of target because they compress so much. So a recoil pad that is really, really squishy isn't good for heavy recoiling rifles. Now, a recoil pad that is just too firm really doesn't act like a recoil pad at all. The old Ruger recoil pads were like attaching a brick to the end of your stock. They felt no different than a steel butt plate, in my opinion. So I don't think your recoil pad is the problem. The recoil pad that rifle came with is a good one. You just opted to get a really light rifle and a heavy recoiling Magnum cartridge, and that's the price you pay. And our next letter is from Stephen in St. George, Utah. Stephen wrote, "I like your videos, but you are wrong about bullet penetration. A faster bullet will lose speed more quickly, so it will not penetrate as deep as a heavy, slow bullet. You overlook the simple scientific fact. This is why guides use a 500 Nitro Express instead of a 416 Rigby in Africa for stopping dangerous game." Sorry, Stephen. Bullshit! 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 I actually emailed Steven back after he wrote this and told him to send me a link or a reference to his simple scientific fact. And he sent me a link to a Reddit chat. And here's a simple scientific fact for you, Steven. Velocity matters for penetration. Given equal full metal jacket bullets, a 9mm Luger will outpenetrate a 45 ACP, even though the 45 weighs more and has better sectional density bullets. This is because the 9mm, it has significantly more velocity. The 357 Magnum gives amazing penetration with lighter bullets because of its velocity. A faster bullet will lose velocity at a faster rate. So you are correct about that. But this isn't enough to just stop that bullet immediately while it's penetrating. And the velocity of that bullet is still greater than the slower bullet, even though its velocity is diminishing faster. On the Africa hunting comment that you made, the 416s actually outpenetrate most of the big bores. Bullet for bullet, a 416 will outpenetrate a 470 or 500 Nitro Express every time. The additional 200 to 300 feet per second velocity of the 416 drives the bullet deeper. Sorry, that's a simple scientific fact. PHs use big bores for the increased energy, not for more penetration. They use solids for that. And our next letter is from Zach in Tucson, Arizona. Zach wrote, "Dear Desert Dog, I always enjoy Hunt Camp Mail and find it thoughtful, well presented, and full of good information. Maybe that's the strength and weakness of Hunt Camp Mail, i.e., it doesn't rely on stupid clickbait and mindless bro gospel, so it doesn't appeal to the average hunting content YouTuber. I have a couple of ideas, though. You could go the Cameron Haynes route and give us some hot shirtless vids of you packing out an elk after gut shooting it with your bow at 100 yards. Or you can go full on Best of the West, wounding shit all over the place in your flat brim hat and swole shirt." Click the douchebag in this video, and he sent me a link to a video. The guy has 300,000 subscribers, multiple sponsors, and half the video is an ad. He misses one Oryx shooting off a bog, bitches about how unstable it is, then shoots another Oryx in the ass and takes a bunch of glory pics with the exit hole showing it wounded center of the offside ham. But first, he has to plug his 7 PRC and Hornady ammo. Keep doing what you do, Desert Dog. You might be right. It's not what I want to hear, but you might be right. I mean, that might be where all the money and investment in the modern hunting industry is right now. I certainly hope it's not the future of hunting, but if that is the future of hunting, I really have no place in it. And our next letter is from Walter in Maryland. Walter wrote, "My question is in regards to a topic you covered in the April Hunt Camp Mail, specifically about the various types of safeties and how they operate. I hunt with a CVA Cascade SB, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are as to, one, whether the stock safety on that rifle is adequate, and number two, if not, what drop-in trigger safety would you recommend?" Well, Walter, any safety that does not physically block the firing pin or decock the hammer is not totally drop safe, in my opinion. It's my understanding that the CVA Cascade does have a firing pin blocking safety on it. But, I've never taken one down to verify that, so don't 100% take my word for that. But, I have no experience with that particular rifle, so I guess I can't give you a definitive answer. And our next letter is from Frederick in Quebec, Canada. Frederick wrote, I would like to congratulate you on your high quality work. I'm always looking forward to your new videos. I'm a French Canadian from the province of Quebec. Here, rough terrain does not allow shooting more than 350 yards. The majority of our shots are between 50 and 150 yards. I just bought a Sako S20 and 300 Win Mag to hunt moose. She shoots the Norma Oryx beautifully under 1 MOA. Norma Oryx doesn't have an impressive BC, but it does have an excellent reputation for big game. Since my weapon is accurate with it, and I never hunt at long distances, do you think I made a good choice with this bullet? Frederick, the Norma Oryx is a fantastic bullet from everything I've seen. And the fact that it shoots so great out of your rifle is just icing on the cake for you. You know, you're in a win-win situation right now, my friend. You should watch one of my older videos titled Hunting Bullet Hype, where I discuss the fact that BCs are of very little importance when you're hunting at ethical hunting distances. You know, I definitely use what you have, Frederick. And our next letter is from Victor in New Mexico. Victor wrote, how often do you clean your hunting rifles? I usually clean my hunting rifles and shotguns once per year. You know, I clean them after the hunting season ends and before I'm ready to put them back in the safe for long-term storage. The only time I'll ever clean a firearm during hunting season is when my gun gets exposed to water, mud, or it gets caked with that really fine talcum powder like dust. You know, and when that happens, I'll clean the rifle up, put some fouling shots down the barrel, verify my zero, and continue to hunt. Remember, you know, once you clean your hunting rifle and you fire your fouling shots and verify your zero and everything, you don't want to touch that bore. You want to leave it in that condition because that's how it's going to shoot for a while. And our last letter is from one of my favorite subscribers, Frankie in Florida. Frankie wrote, I just got a call from Bass Pro and I'm good to go with a 416 Rem Mag. On Tuesday, I'll start ordering dies and other supplies for the 416. I need to get an 8-pound keg of H4895. What seeding and resizing dies are you using on Winnie? Well, on Winnie, I just use a plain old set of RCBS dies, and I crimp every round with a Lee factory crimp die. And that's on that 416, it's going to be a moderately heavy crimp. You know, you're also going to need a VLD style chamfer tool and use a heavy chamfer on those so those big flat base bullets don't bulge the neck while you're seeding them. I used to use Hornady 416 Rem Mag brass in the past. It worked fine, but it required a little bit more case prep on the new brass, and it had pretty low case capacity until you fire formed it. Lately, I've been using the Norma 416 Remington Magnum brass, and I like it a lot better. A word of caution, though, on your bullet selection. The Safari Express and 416 Remington Magnum has a magazine that's almost exactly to SAMI specs. So if your cartridge overall length exceeds 3.6 inches, cartridges might not fit or reliably feed from the magazine. So you can't go longer than SAMI specs on that. On dangerous game loads, we crimp into the cantilever or the driving band of the bullet. So you need a bullet that won't exceed the SAMI cartridge overall length specifications when crimped into the cantilever. You know, in some bullets, like in order to get the cutting edge bullet Safari solids to work in my Safari Express, I have to actually trim my brass about 5 thousandths under the minimum trim length to get the right cartridge overall length on those. Well, that's it for this month's Hunt Camp Mail. Here's some memes for May. before I go any further, I need to make a correction to last month's episode of Hunt Camp Mail. When I was speaking about Blaser straight pull rifles in response to a question last month, I mentioned that Philip Glass had issues with his Blaser R8 that required that gun to be sent back to the manufacturer. It was actually Philip's son that had to send his Blaser R8 back to the manufacturer for repairs, not Philip. So thank you for contacting me, Philip, and I'm glad to clear that up on the air for you. Also, I know I'm late to the party this year. A lot of my viewers, like it when I remind them when HOGDON's new reloading manual magazine comes out every year. And I forgot to notify you guys of that, but a couple of my viewers brought up questions about reloading for their 257 Roberts. And I know thousands of you out there are huge fans of the 257 Bob and reload for it. But this year's edition of HOGDON's reloading manual actually focuses on the 257 Roberts, and it has some very creative load data in it, and also a lot of modern loads for what they call 257 Roberts plus P ammo. And also, I don't know why, but this year they put a heavy emphasis on 4570 loads. I think it's like 3 pages of 4570 load data in here. So they really did you guys, you 4570 guys, a favor this year, and this year's reloading manual from HOGDON. Along these same lines, many of you are constantly asking me for more reloading content, but I have to tiptoe around YouTube's definition of manufacturing ammunition. I have some interesting videos planned for next month, so stay tuned for that. I'll also be in the beautiful state of Hawaii next month, trying to entice the biggest bonefish on Earth to take my flies. So we'll see how that goes. I might make a video on that as well. For that, you can reach me with any questions or comments at desertdogoutdoors@gmail.com. Thank you for watching, and as always, good hunting.